Far beyond the noise of the modern world, beyond the headlines about Israel, Iran, and the rising tensions in the Middle East, something happened today in the heart of Jerusalem that left even the most seasoned believers in tears. It was not a political event. It was not a military movement. It was something quiet, almost hidden, yet so powerful that pilgrims standing near the old city said they felt as if time itself had paused for a moment, so that heaven could whisper to the earth. What they saw today has already been called one of the most mysterious and spiritually charged moments captured in Jerusalem in years. And the more witnesses speak, the more people around the world are wondering if this could be one of those prophetic signs. Many Christians have been waiting for one of those moments that shakes the soul and forces you to ask if biblical prophecy is unfolding right before our eyes. Everything began early this morning near the Lion's Gate, as groups of Christian pilgrims walked toward the Via Dolorosa for prayer. The air was unusually still, almost heavy, as if the atmosphere itself were holding something. Several described the same sense of anticipation, like the feeling right before a storm breaks. But there was no storm. The sky was clear. The sun hung over Jerusalem the way it always does, bright, ancient, silent. And yet, beneath that silence, something was different. Pilgrims reported hearing a low, vibrating sound coming from the direction of the Temple Mount. Not loud, not dramatic, just enough to make them turn their heads. Some said it felt like a chauffeur blast, others like a distant hum or resonance. It wasn't mechanical, and it wasn't coming from speakers or construction equipment. It was deeper, almost like it was coming from the stones themselves. Those ancient stones that have seen thousands of years of conflict, worship, tears, and prophecy. As the sound grew slightly stronger, something even stranger happened. A soft, radiant shimmer appeared above the eastern side of the Temple Mount. Not a beam, not a laser, not a reflection that could be explained away quickly. This was something organic, almost alive, like a ripple of light moving across the air. Some pilgrims fell to their knees instantly. Others reached for their phones, trying to capture what they were seeing, though most recordings show almost nothing, just a faint distortion, as if whatever appeared refused to be fully filmed. One woman from Brazil burst into tears, saying she felt a warmth pour over her shoulders, like someone was standing behind her, praying for her. A man from Mexico said he felt an overwhelming conviction in his heart, describing it as a call to wake up, and many others, from the United States, Poland, South Korea, Italy, and countless nations, reported the same physical reaction: shivers, trembling hands, and a sudden sense of urgency. Not fear, but awakening. They couldn't explain it, but they all recognized it. Jerusalem has seen its share of mysteries, signs, and strange events, but this one struck differently, because it came at a time when the world is already holding its breath. With escalating conflicts in Israel, rising threats from Iran, renewed movements around the Temple Mount, and ongoing debates about prophecy, the slightest unusual event in the city tends to draw enormous attention. But today's event didn't draw attention because of the news, it drew attention because of the spiritual weight the moment carried. Witnesses said the atmosphere changed completely when a sudden breeze swept through the courtyard. Though the trees around barely moved, the light shimmered again, longer this time, and a type of silence fell over the area that people described as supernatural, charged, and absolutely unforgettable. Several pilgrims said they felt like they were standing in the pages of the book of Revelation, as if a veil had been lifted for just a second. Others said it reminded them of the biblical descriptions of God revealing himself in subtle yet overwhelming ways, like Elijah's whisper on the mountain. What unsettled many of the pilgrims was not the visual phenomenon itself, but what they felt inside. Some described sudden repentance, others sudden clarity about decisions they had been postponing, and some said they felt God calling them to return to prayer, holiness, or forgiveness. One young man said he felt like someone had placed a hand on his chest and whispered, "Return to me before it's too late." Whether this was psychological, emotional, or spiritual is something the world will debate, but the pilgrims who lived it insist it was real, and it didn't end there. A few minutes later, a group of Orthodox Jewish boys passing by abruptly stopped and stared at the sky. One of them whispered something in Hebrew, and their teacher quickly ushered them along, but not before several Christians noticed that even he looked shaken. A Muslim guard at the Temple Mount, Entron, paused and looked up as well, visibly confused. For a moment, it seemed like everyone, regardless of religion, felt something they couldn't describe. This moment, brief as it was, brought an unexpected unity among the witnesses. Strangers held hands, others prayed together in languages they didn't even understand. And as they walked away, many said they felt like they had just seen a warning, a sign, or a reminder that the spiritual battle in Jerusalem is intensifying, that the countdown is accelerating, that prophecy is inching closer to fulfillment. So the question remains, what did they really see? Was it a natural occurrence, a rare atmospheric event, a reflection of sunlight, or was it something more, something connected to the increasing prophetic tension surrounding Jerusalem, the coming conflict between Israel and Iran, the shifting alliances in the Middle East, and the growing sense among Christians worldwide that the end times are unfolding piece by piece? Whatever it was, one thing is certain. Today, Jerusalem once again stirred the hearts of millions, reminding the world why this small city, this spiritual epicenter of prophecy, remains the most mysterious, contested, and spiritually potent place on earth. And perhaps, just perhaps, God allowed a small glimpse today, not to terrify, not to confuse, but to wake his people up before the greatest chapters of prophecy begin to unfold. If you watched this far, I want to hear from you. What do you think happened today in Jerusalem? Do you believe it was a sign, a warning, a spiritual awakening? Comment your thoughts below. Your opinion matters for this community. And if you want to help the video reach even more people, write the phrase, "I am awake," in the comments so I know you stayed with me until the end. Or comment, "Jerusalem is speaking." If you truly felt something while listening to this story, I'll be reading everything. And even though what happened earlier today in Jerusalem left pilgrims trembling, what unfolded in the hours that followed only deepened the mystery, as if the city itself refused to let the moment fade. People expected things to return to normal. Jerusalem always moves fast, swallowing extraordinary moments back into its ancient rhythm. But this time, the atmosphere didn't reset. Instead, it felt like the city was holding its breath, like something invisible lingered over the stones, whispering that the earlier sign was merely the beginning of something larger, something unfolding quietly behind the curtain of the ordinary. As the pilgrims dispersed into the narrow streets of the old city, many reported that the sensation they felt near the Temple Mount followed them, not as fear, not as anxiety, but as a strange awareness that seemed to heighten their senses. Several described hearing footsteps behind them, even when no one was there, or feeling watched in a way that wasn't threatening, but undeniably present. Some said they kept turning around, expecting to see someone familiar, like a guide or another worshipper, only to find empty alleys. And yet, the feeling continued, persistent, warm, purposeful. Merchants in the Christian quarter noticed the change as well. One shopkeeper said that, for the first time in years, groups of tourists entered his small store silently, almost reverently, as if reluctant to break whatever was happening in the air around them. A priest from a nearby monastery said he felt such an unusual stillness that he paused his routine prayers, sensing something he hadn't felt since his early days of ministry. The old stone walls seemed to carry a hum, an undertone, almost like a heartbeat vibrating through the city's very foundation. Then came the second moment, subtle but impossible to ignore. As afternoon sunlight washed over the rooftops, multiple people across different neighborhoods claimed they saw brief flashes of gold, reflecting from the eastern side of the old city, even though no surface there should reflect that kind of light at that hour. Some believed it was sunlight hitting metal. Others argued it was too synchronized, too rhythmic, almost like a pulse. A group of Polish pilgrims insisted they saw what looked like movement in the distance, like a shadow shifting across the top of the ancient stones. Yet, there was no one up there. What perplexed them even more was that the shadow moved against the direction of the sun. None of this was dramatic enough to be labeled a miracle. It wasn't sensational or overwhelming, but it was strange, consistent, and shared by people from completely different backgrounds who didn't know each other. The city seemed alive in a way that defied logic, as if layers of history were sliding open for those with eyes to notice. And perhaps that's what made the entire experience so unnerving, not the sight itself, but the recognition that Jerusalem was behaving like a place responding to a spiritual trigger that the world hadn't noticed yet. Some whispered that the veil between heaven and earth was thinner than usual, that spiritual activity was intensifying because something is approaching, something tied to prophecy, conflict, and the destiny of Israel. Rumors spread quickly, as they always do in Jerusalem. But this time, there was no dismissal, no mocking tone. Even skeptics admitted feeling unsettled. One American tourist, who identified himself as non-religious, said he couldn't shake the impression that the city was breathing, as if waking from a long sleep. Even more strangely, several children, local and foreign, began asking their parents the same peculiar question. Why is the sky singing? Parents assumed it was imagination, but the children insisted. Their descriptions were eerily similar. A soft hum, a vibration, something they could feel more than hear. Some pointed to the sky and said they felt called, though they didn't know by what. And this detail, though small, spread faster than anything else. Children don't carry the weight of prophecy, politics, or religious expectation. They simply describe what they sense, and the fact that they sensed it left many grown adults deeply unsettled. As the sun continued to set, the faint golden flashes seen earlier shifted. They no longer appeared as pulses, but as something resembling movements, low, deliberate, almost like a curtain of light drifting downwards and dissolving before touching the ground. People tried capturing it on camera, but the recordings all shared the same strange flaw. When the light appeared, the audio distorted, microphones cracked, some even went silent completely, only to resume once the light faded. This was not normal interference. It was too precise, too selective. Pilgrims who had already returned to their hotels said they felt a sudden heaviness, as if the day's earlier experience was only a hint of what was to come. One Brazilian woman said she woke from a short nap with tears flowing down her face, though she didn't feel sad. She said she dreamt of a massive door opening over Jerusalem, spilling out light that felt warm yet overwhelming, and a voice saying, "Prepare yourselves." She wasn't the only one. Several others across the city reported dreams that felt unusually real, vivid and filled with symbolism. Lamps being lit, trumpets being polished, scrolls being opened. A man from Canada said he dreamt of Jerusalem glowing at night like a lantern, with beams rising into the sky like signal. These dreams, of course, could be dismissed as emotional reactions to the day's events. But what made them stand out was how similar they were. Different languages, different backgrounds, different ages, and yet the imagery was nearly identical. Light, preparation, awakening. It was as if Jerusalem had imprinted something onto their hearts, something that bypassed the logic of the mind. As night fell completely, another layer of strangeness emerged. Street cats across the old city began behaving unusually. They moved in groups, something they rarely do, and stood in long pauses, staring in the same direction, eastward. Locals noticed this instantly, because cats in Jerusalem are famously unpredictable and scattered. But tonight, they were aligned, attentive, almost alert. It was bizarre enough that a few residents filmed it, whispering nervously, as dozens of cats held their gaze steady toward the Temple Mount, as if waiting for something to happen. And if that was not enough, around midnight, a faint glow appeared again in the sky, not gold this time, but pale white, almost like a mist, illuminated from within. It wasn't bright and didn't move quickly. It hovered, expanded slightly, and then shrank, before vanishing entirely. No booming sound, no thunder, no energy burst, just a quiet, eerie manifestation that left witnesses silent and motionless. A group of young men walking back from the Western Wall said the moment the light disappeared, they felt a cold wind pass them, even though the air had been warm all night. This time, the news traveled far beyond Jerusalem. Messages flooded social media, and the entire city buzzed with whispered conversations at cafes, hotels, and even inside churches and synagogues. People spoke softly, almost fearfully, not wanting to exaggerate, but not daring to dismiss the events either. Something was shifting, something ancient, something prophetic, and even though no one could explain it, everyone felt the same truth deep within. Jerusalem is stirring. Some say these events are warnings. Others believe they are preparations. Some see them as echoes of prophetic times approaching faster than expected. Whatever the interpretation, one thing is undeniable: something in Jerusalem changed today. And if the world is paying attention, it should make every single one of us stop, think, and ask ourselves if we are ready for what may be coming next. And even as the city slowly settled into the deep hours of the night, Jerusalem refused to return to normal. The earlier signs, the strange behaviors, the unexplained flashes of light, the dreams, the atmosphere that felt alive, all of it seemed to merge into something even more unsettling as dawn approached. Witnesses said they woke up with the unshakable impression that something had been released during the night, as if an unseen layer of the city had shifted while everyone slept. Even those who usually paid no attention to spiritual matters admitted that the morning felt heavier, as if the air carried a message that had not yet been translated. The early hours revealed something even more peculiar. At several holy sites, candles that had been extinguished the night before were found burned down completely by morning, despite no one being present to relight them. Priests, monks, and caretakers insisted the rooms were locked, untouched. Some suggested drafts or accidents, but the same phenomenon occurred in different places simultaneously, including churches separated by long distances. The details spread quietly among the local, adding yet another layer to the already strange sequence of events. Visitors walking through the Damascus Gate before sunrise reported hearing a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the stones beneath their feet. Not everyone heard it, only a few people who were passing through at just the right moment, but those who did described the sound as something that didn't feel external. It felt internal, like a vibration inside the body, rather than in the air. They tried to explain it, but the more they spoke, the more confused and overwhelmed they became, as if the language wasn't enough to capture the sensation. One man said he felt like the city was trying to communicate, though with what or whom, he couldn't say. As the sun began rising, something even stranger unfolded. Birds that usually gather around the rooftops of the old city flew in perfectly synchronized patterns, circling the same point repeatedly without scattering, as if following an invisible command. Residents who had lived there their entire lives said they had never seen such coordination, especially not among species that normally don't interact. What made it more shocking was that once the light hit the dome tops, all the birds suddenly stopped mid-flight, hovered for half a second, and then dispersed in different directions, as if a signal had been cut. It lasted only a moment, but it left onlookers speechless. Throughout the city, conversations grew more intense. People who normally avoided speaking about spiritual matters suddenly found themselves diving into deep reflections. Taxi drivers, tourists, store owners, elderly residents, everyone seemed to carry a distraction in their eyes, glancing upward every so often, as though expecting something else to happen. Phones kept buzzing with messages between locals and travelers, sharing fragments of stories, sensations, sudden chills, vivid dreams, or feelings that made no sense logically, but felt too real to ignore. Meanwhile, several pilgrims preparing to leave the city postponed their departures. They said they felt pulled, as if something was telling them the story of the last 24 hours wasn't complete yet. One woman said she couldn't shake the impression that she was meant to witness something else before boarding her plane. Another man from Argentina checked out of his hotel twice, but returned both times, saying he had a sensation in his chest that wouldn't let him leave. People who barely knew each other began forming small groups, discussing what they had felt, urging one another to stay just a little longer, even though no one knew exactly what they were waiting for. Local guides reported that several security cameras around the old city glitched at the exact same minute during the night, not long enough to cause alarm, but long enough for technicians to notice the synchronization. The recordings during those seconds showed nothing unusual, the empty courtyards and quiet pathways, but the timing made some feel uneasy, as if the city had paused itself deliberately, hiding something from human eyes. Experts said it was probably a technical coincidence, but those who had witnessed the events of the previous day were not convinced. By mid-morning, the atmosphere across Jerusalem felt charged once again. Not chaotic, not fearful, simply expectant. People moved differently, slower, more aware, as though they sensed they were walking on a threshold. Even the sunlight felt altered, softer but deeper, illuminating the stones in a way that almost made them appear new. Pilgrims touched the walls of the old city and described feeling warmth that seemed to pulse under their poles, though the stones themselves remained cool to the touch. What truly marked the morning, however, was the silence that settled over certain corners of the city. In places normally filled with noise, merchants calling out, footsteps echoing conversations. Buzzing, there were sudden moments when everything stopped, not permanently, not dramatically, but long enough for people to freeze and look around, wondering why the environment had gone still. These pauses felt coordinated, almost intentional, as if the city was listening, waiting for something to unfold. And within all this strangeness, one feeling united thousands of hearts, the sense that this chain of events was building toward something. Not a climax, not an ending, but a continuation that would stretch beyond this video, beyond this moment, beyond what anyone could fully grasp. It wasn't fear, it wasn't excitement. It was recognition, the quiet awareness that the world is shifting in ways we cannot yet explain, and that the places tied to prophecy are beginning to stir in ways people can no longer ignore. For those who watched this far, understand something important. What happened in Jerusalem over these hours is not an isolated moment. It feels like the opening of a sequence, the first pages of a story that hasn't finished revealing itself. Anyone paying attention can feel it. Anyone with discernment can sense it. And those who choose to look deeper, to observe the patterns, to stay alert to what is unfolding, those people will begin to understand why these signs matter, why they are happening now, and why the world should not dismiss them as coincidence. As you continue following this journey, stay attentive, stay curious, and most importantly, stay connected, because what is coming next may not be loud, but it will be undeniable. And when it happens, you will want to be here with us, witnessing it in real time, piece by piece, as the story continues to unfold.